All right, so today we're going to dive into something a little different. Sketching.
All right.
I know what you might be thinking. Hold on, I'm no artist.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's exactly the point.
Okay.
We're diving into This Is Not a Drawing Class, a guide to visual communication in design and engineering by Maarten van de Wiel and Maarten Stolk.
Okay.
They argue that anyone, even those who think they can't draw a straight line, can use sketching to unlock incredible design and engineering potential. I think we all have those moments, right?
Yes.
Where, like, words just don't cut it.
Totally.
And I think this book really does, it kind of flips the script on this whole idea of sketching.
Yes.
You know, it takes it away from this, like, artistic talent,
Yeah.
this thing that you have to be born with, to
Right.
being, like, this practical tool.
It's funny you say that because that's exactly what caught my eye.
Yeah.
It's not about being, the next Da Vinci or something.
Right, right.
It's about having this other way to kind of think through things and share those ideas visually.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know what else? Henry, in the foreword, he calls the book a Sherpa.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he's especially excited about how it really clarifies the when and the why of sketching, not just the whole how-to stuff.
That's so key, right?
Yes,
It's like you can have the fanciest tools, but if you don't know when to use them,
Right.
what's the point?
exactly.
And the book dives into these two main sketching mindsets.
Okay.
They call them exploratory and communicative.
Ooh, okay. I like the sound of those. Break those down for me a little bit.
Okay, so think of exploratory sketching kind of like visual brainstorming.
Okay.
So it's messy, it's quick, and there are no wrong answers.
Okay.
It's just about getting those rough ideas out of your head and onto the page.
I can totally see that. So then communicative sketching, is that about taking those rough gems, so to speak,
Yes.
and like polishing them up for an audience?
Exactly. It's
Alright.
about refining your sketches to make them like clear and engaging for, whoever you're sharing them with.
That makes a ton of sense. Now, the book doesn't shy away from the fact that many people, myself included sometimes,
Right.
feel like, oh, I can't draw. Like
It's so common.
it is.
Yeah.
How do they tackle that mental block?
So they totally address it head on, and they actually compare it to like learning a musical instrument
Okay.
or a new language.
Okay.
So, you don't pick up a guitar
Right.
expecting to play like Jimi Hendrix on day one.
Yeah, you don't.
It's all about practice and building that skill over time.
It's that whole growth mindset idea.
Yeah. Exactly.
But applied to sketching.
Yes.
And speaking of practice, they really encourage embracing the mess, especially in that exploratory phase.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like they're giving you permission to ditch the eraser.
Yeah.
And just go for it.
Absolutely. Keeping it simple.
Yeah.
One pen,
Okay.
small sketches, no need for fancy perspectives. You're just getting those ideas flowing.
I like it.
They even suggest like using tracing paper over existing photos or 3D models.
Now, that's a clever trick.
Right.
It's like they're saying, don't get hung up on the details yet. Just focus on the problem you're trying to solve.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They don't want you to get bogged down too early in the process.
Right.
So during that exploratory phase,
Yes.
it's all about just capturing those raw, unfiltered ideas.
So it's kind of like brainstorming, but on paper.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm sold on the exploratory part.
Yeah.
But how do we shift gears from like that beautiful mess
Right.
to something that we can actually share with other people?
Right.
And that's where the communicative sketching comes in.
You got it.
Okay.
So it's about taking those rough sketches,
Yeah.
which, let's be honest, probably look like a bunch of chicken scratches to anyone else,
Right.
and turn them into something clear, concise,
Okay.
and even like visually appealing.
I can already hear the I'm not an artist protests.
Right, right.
So how do they take those rough ideas
Right.
and without like sending us to art school,
Right.
how do they make it presentable?
Well, this is where they introduce this idea of what they call strategic upgrades.
Okay.
So think of it like editing a film.
Okay.
You're not scrapping the entire movie in the editing room.
Right.
You're refining it.
Okay.
So you're adding contrast.
Okay.
You're adding highlights, maybe some strategic shading, and that can guide the viewer's eye.
Right. It's about adding those finishing touches to make stuff stand out.
Exactly.
Okay. And they even talk about using like little annotations, arrows and bullets
Oh, yeah, those are great.
to give people context
Yes, yes.
and to kind of guide them through it.
Yeah, they actually compared the page to a stage,
Oh.
which I think is really helpful.
Okay.
Because it's like you get to decide what's in the spotlight,
Right.
what's in the background,
Okay.
and how to direct the audience's attention.
This is blowing my mind. I'm already seeing my own, like, messy note-taking in a whole new light.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about the why behind sketching
Mm.
and these two main approaches.
Yes.
But what about just the practical how-to stuff? Like,
Yeah.
we're going to learn some...
Yeah, they get into that too.
Okay.
And one of the first things they dive into is, and I thought this was fascinating,
Okay.
is actually how to hold your pen differently for sketching versus writing.
Wait, are you serious?
I know?
Like, how I'm holding my pen actually makes a difference.
Yes. It makes a world of difference.
Oh, my goodness. Tell me more, because this is already life-changing.
It seems so simple. Right.
Right.
But they talk about how, like, writing that relies on these really fine motor skills.
Okay.
Whereas sketching utilizes more of your gross motor skills.
Okay.
Which means that we need to be engaging different muscles.
Okay, I am putting down my pen right now because this is a revelation. So how should we be holding our pens for sketching?
It's all about loosening up.
Yep.
And engaging those bigger muscle groups.
Okay.
So instead of gripping the pen really close to the tip like we do for writing,
Right.
they recommend holding it further back.
Okay.
Almost like you're sketching with your entire arm instead of just your fingertips.
So it's less about, like, those tiny controlled movements and
Yeah.
more about embracing, like, a broader, freer range of motion.
Exactly. Think about the difference between, like, a calligrapher who's, carefully crafting each letter.
Right.
And then, like, a street artist who's creating this, like, large mural.
Okay.
They're using totally different muscle groups to achieve those different effects.
That makes so much sense. And honestly, it sounds a lot less intimidating than trying to make my hand do, like, microscopic movements perfectly.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
I like that.
And this new grip can really help you achieve those smoother, more confident lines,
Right.
especially for, like, those big sweeping strokes.
Okay, so new grip, check. What other, like, sketching secrets does this book reveal?
Well, they dive into some, like, really fundamental techniques,
Let's
like
say.
drawing straight lines, curves,
Okay.
and even, those dreaded circles and ellipses,
Oh, tell me about it.
which,
Yes.
can be surprisingly tricky to master.
I've lost count of how many times I've attempted a perfect circle
Mm-hmm.
only to end up with something that looks more like a lumpy potato.
Yeah, and that's where I think their approach is really refreshing.
Okay.
They don't expect you to, like, magically crank out these perfect shapes
Yeah.
on the first try.
Okay.
So instead of, like, striving for that immediate machine-like precision,
Yes.
they advocate for, like, an iterative process.
Iterative process, I mean, like, practice makes perfect.
Exactly. So
Okay.
pick circles, for example.
Okay.
They suggest, like, drawing over the same line multiple times, really
Right.
paying attention to, like, where you tend to deviate from that, ideal circular shape.
Right.
And, with each pass, you subtly adjust your hand movement
Okay.
and you gradually kind of train your hand to achieve that smooth, continuous motion.
So it's like you're fine-tuning your hand-eye coordination with each rotation, kind of like, finding your rhythm with a musical instrument.
Got it.
I like it.
And they apply a similar principle to ellipses,
Okay.
which, are crucial for sketching anything cylindrical.
Right.
And practice is key there, especially when it comes to drawing them from, different angles,
Right.
which adds that element of perspective.
Speaking of perspective, that's always been a bit of a head-scratcher for me.
Yeah.
The book delves into 1-point, 2-point, 3-point perspective.
Right.
How does that fit into this whole, like, exploratory sketching approach?
Right.
Because to me, that requires some serious technical precision.
That's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
They actually encourage what they call faking it,
Oh,
especially during those, like, early ideation phases.
faking it. I'm suddenly feeling a little uneasy.
I know, it sounds a little,
Wow.
it's not as sketchy as it sounds.
Okay.
I mean, they're not saying you should, like, completely disregard the principles of perspective.
Right.
It's more about, not getting bogged down in those meticulous technicalities
Okay.
when you're just trying to, like, get those initial ideas out.
So it's like sketching with confidence, even if you haven't, like, perfectly plotted every vanishing point and, converging lines.
Precisely. Like, as long as you have, like, a basic understanding of how those principles work,
Right.
you can kind of intuitively suggest those three-dimensional relationships
Okay.
in your sketches
Yeah.
without, like, getting lost in the weeds.
I love that. So it's about capturing, like, the essence of the idea, the overall visual impact,
Yeah.
rather than getting bogged down in, like, the technical nitty-gritty. This is making me rethink my entire approach to visual thinking. This whole faking it approach to perspective is amazing. It makes those, like, really complex drawings seem so much more approachable. But what happens when we do want to add in those finer details?
Right.
You know, like those finishing touches to really bring our sketches to life?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, like drawing circles in perspective.
Yay.
Or those really intricate cutouts and joints.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like those would require like a whole other level of precision.
They definitely do. And the book acknowledges that complexity for sure, especially as you're, working with more intricate designs.
Okay.
But even then, they offer some really clever workarounds,
Okay.
especially for those like early stages when you're still kind of like exploring different ideas
Right.
and you don't necessarily want to get bogged down.
Okay, do tell. Because I am all about finding those shortcuts that don't like compromise the quality of the work at the end of the day.
Well, remember that tracing paper we were talking about earlier? Yes.
It comes in handy here too.
Oh.
They're big proponents of using tools like tracing paper, especially over existing 3D models or even photographs.
Interesting.
It's about like strategically using those resources to your advantage instead of feeling like you have to reinvent the wheel every single time.
So instead of getting caught up in the like minutia of recreating every little detail from scratch,
Yes.
we can use those like underlays as a foundation to build upon.
Exactly. You're freeing up your mental energy to focus on like the actual design problem itself, not on, perfectly replicating what's already there.
Okay.
It's like, I always think of it as like tracing over someone else's artwork versus using like a light box to project an image as a starting point for your own, unique creation.
Fantastic analogy.
Wow.
You're still using a guide,
Yeah.
but it's not about like copying.
Yeah.
It's about having that starting point that then lets you like really focus on your own creative input. Exactly. And then, once you've gone through those initial ideas, tested different variations, maybe honed in on a direction you like, then the book really encourages that shift into the communicative mindset.
Ah, yes. From beautiful mess to boardroom ready. Right.
You got it. It's about taking those rough sketches and, like we were talking about earlier, adding in those strategic elements that enhance clarity, guide the viewer's eye, and really tell a more compelling story.
Okay.
And they use this great analogy of the page being like a stage.
Ooh, like that.
Which I think is really helpful.
So instead of like overwhelming your audience with just like a jumble of ideas, you're kind of like strategically highlighting certain elements, dimming the lights on others, just like a director would do, like in a theatrical production.
Precisely.
That's amazing.
Think about how a spotlight draws your attention to a particular actor on the stage, or how the set design can transport you to, a different time or place.
Yeah.
You can achieve those same effects in your sketches.
So elements like, contrast, shading, even those annotations we talked about.
Yes, totally.
Become like those like subtle stage cues.
Yes.
Leading the viewer's eye exactly where you want it to go.
Exactly. And even remembering that, like, what you choose to leave out can be just as important as what you include.
Okay.
So it's, finding that balance between providing enough detail to get your idea across clearly, but also not, overwhelming the viewer with a bunch of unnecessary information.
It's like that Coco Chanel quote about taking one thing off before you leave the house.
Yeah.
Sometimes less is truly more when it comes to like, powerful communication.
I love that. And I think that's so true, especially, in a world that's just saturated with information.
Yes.
That ability to like distill those complex ideas into those really clear, compelling visuals. That's an invaluable skill.
This has been honestly a complete eye-opener. I feel like I have like unlocked a whole new set of tools for brainstorming, for problem solving, for communicating my ideas more effectively. Any like final words of wisdom for our listeners before they embark on their sketching adventures?
I always say, the first step is often the hardest.
Right.
So don't be afraid to just pick up that pen and just start sketching.
Yeah.
Embrace those messy first drafts.
Right.
Experiment freely and trust the process.
Love it.
The more you do it, the more confident you'll become.
Right.
And, who knows? You might even surprise yourself with what you come up with.
What a fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the world of sketching.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time, keep those creative sparks flying.